What's going on, guys?
What is going on, Mr. Cody?
How you guys doing today?
Awesome. Good. Fantastic. Just stoked to be here.
Got your afternoon coffee?
What is that?
Oh, you don't know about this.
How do I not know about that? What is that? Is that one of our sponsors?
This is special. This is not one of our sponsors, but good segue. Let's talk about our sponsors really quick. We got O2, guys. If you haven't checked out the deal from O2, make sure you do that. I'm going to scroll it across the bottom here. Buy 3, get 2 free, 24 packs, plus an O2 mini fridge, Yeti Rambler. It's branded. It's got best hour of their day on it. It's got O2 on it. And I will throw the link into the chat. I'll pin it up to the top. So if you're an affiliate owner, you can check out the best hour of their day O2 deal that we've got going on right now with our good buddies over at O2.
Wait a second. Did you say no, it's not from our sponsors, but that is from our sponsors? That
This is
little
not
Yeti Rambler.
This is not from our sponsors.
That's not the Yeti Rambler?
This is not the Yeti Rambler.
Okay. What is that?
This is the same thing.
This is my own special Fellow. If you know the brand Fellow.
I don't.
Well, they're big in the coffee space. The Fellow Carter travel mug.
Wow.
And I got it laser etched with best hour of their day on it just to be extra.
Shot with lasers, man. You are extra, Cody. I like it.
I am
lasers.
Extra. See this mustache, this mullet? Come on now.
Dude, see this lack of hair I have everywhere? I appreciate you in all forms. Should we tell everyone who we have?
Yeah. Let's talk
about
it.
I think we should.
Who is this guy over here?
There's another person on the screen. Well, first off, Jason's not here and Fern's not here. So it's people are getting stuck with me and you, Cody. This is fantastic. I'm stoked for it. But we have none other than the Dan Hollingsworth. And if you don't know who he is, he's been around for eternity. Like there's never been a time where he wasn't around. Literally the oldest human being I know. But we're gonna dig into it a little bit. He came on to staff when I was still a fetus. And he also came on with the amount of knowledge that I will never begin to touch. And that was like how he started this process. So why don't you tell me, Dan, when you started CrossFit, what you were doing? Actually, you know what? What's your background? And then when did you find CrossFit?
Funny story. The first time I ever saw Pat Barber was at my level 1. At my level 1, I came back from lunch, and there was this little munchkin in diapers still, I think, doing burpees. And I don't remember who, you and Jimmy Letchford maybe did 50 burpees for time. And I remember walking in going, what the hell are these guys doing? And they're like, someone said, oh, they're doing 50 burpees for time. And I was still relatively new. And in the moment, I didn't recognize what the hell you were doing. I was like, you guys were moving so fast. I was like, I'm not even sure what the hell they're doing. But you got the burpees done really, really quick, and I was super impressed. So that was my first time meeting Pat Barber, and that was like May of 2008.
And where was that? One World? Where was that? San Diego. Oh, man. Taking it back to the OG San Diego warehouse thing. If anybody listening has never heard of this place, that was the original CrossFit. Was it CrossFit San Diego it was called?
It was, yeah. CrossFit San Diego.
And they were like the corner of this old convention center. So it was this giant, like multiple 100,000 square foot convention center that was empty and vacant. And they took this little like small corner of it. And we used to host gigs there because it was a good big, like one of the first good big spaces.
Yeah, it was huge. Especially the gym that we were at the time was like 700 square feet in Oceanside. And so to walk into CrossFit San Diego and see that huge space was like sort of eye-opening. But yeah, so that was 2008.
Wait, so do you remember, was anyone else at your gig we would know about?
So, Dave Castro was Flowmaster.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Tony Budding was there.
For sure.
Rob Lowe taught nutrition.
Rob Wolf.
Rob Wolf. Yeah, Rob Lowe.
Rob Lowe, the movie star. He came in and taught some nutrition.
That was weird.
He was one of the founders.
Rob Wolf taught nutrition. And then there were some other folks around like CJ.
Yeah.
From Invictus was there. I remember him doing the muscle up breakouts. Nice. You were there for a bit. Who else? I think that was about it.
That was back when we had people just kip the daylights out of it to try to get a muscle up, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Absolutely.
It was like any way, anyhow, you throw
Yep.
that thing up there, we're gonna make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Things have changed. In case anyone hasn't been to a level 1 since 2008,
A little bit.
we've adapted and overcome. So what is your background? And what made you get into CrossFit? Out of curiosity.
Yeah. So
I actually don't know this story.
So I was a physical therapist in the Navy. And so the first time I even heard the word CrossFit was when I was out on deployment on an aircraft carrier. I was a physical therapist on the John C. Stennis. And, prior to this CrossFit thing, my thing was just endurance sports, triathlon, swim, bike, run, like all forms of swim, bike, run. My wife and I had been doing that for a decade. And so when I was out on deployment, I was the guy that was putting in, 30 to 40 miles a week on a treadmill, getting on a spin bike and doing that. And one of our nurses had just come back from Bahrain or somewhere, and he said, "Hey, you look pretty fit. You like to work out. Have you done CrossFit?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "Yeah, it's just a thing online. You could just check it out. But I think you would like it." And I said, "Do you do it?" And he goes, "Well, no, I tried it once. It was terrible." So, all right, I'll look at it. And I pulled it up. And so, so I was a physical therapist. My undergrad was exercise science. I pulled it up. I looked at it. Honestly, I didn't understand what a lot of it was. I do recall my very first memory was watching the original Nasty Girls video with the original music, the original Nasty Girl video. And I remember my first thought being, I mean, I'm sure I couldn't do what these women are doing. Like, it's impressive, but I don't know how it's going to help me swim, bike, and run. Like, they're doing something on rings that I don't understand. They're throwing a barbell around. I had tried a power clean once before, like in college, but I didn't really even recognize that's what they were doing. It just was like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's not going to help me swim, bike, and run. So I just blew it off. Like, well, I probably watched the video a few more times, and then I blew it off.
Fair.
So then fast forward, I left that command and went down to San Diego to Camp Pendleton, and I was working with Special Operations Marines. And literally, there it is. Do you have the original music though? That's the key.
No, because it's all copyrighted. We had to swap it out.
I know.
Yeah.
But so I get down to San Diego and I'm working with these Special Operations Marines, and literally, like, the day my boots hit the ground, all I heard was CrossFit, CrossFit, CrossFit. Hey, sir, do you know about CrossFit? Hey, I'm doing CrossFit. And I was like, oh, there's that thing again. And so I sat down and being a physical therapist, I was like, these knuckleheads are going to get hurt doing this stuff. So let me figure out what it is that they're doing. So when they come in saying I was doing this, I at least have some frame of reference. And so I just started digging into the website, and I started reading, and lo and behold, it challenged some of my previously held notions about fitness.
Specifically,
Specifically, when I read "What is Fitness," it sort of blew my mind. Like, oh, I think I've been perhaps doing this wrong. Like, I couldn't come up with an argument against anything Glassman had put in there. I was like, because I was in the whole world of specificity, and what is fitness is like the antithesis of specificity. And when I read it, I was like, yeah, I don't have a case to make against it. And so that was sort of the approach that I came into it with. So it was
like it's slapped you in the face with a new paradigm, essentially. You're like, here's my vision of the world, and then someone was like, try this, and it, like, you couldn't poke holes in it right away, so you're like, fine,
at all.
I'll give it a shot. Okay, so where'd you go from there?
So coincidentally, at the time, our daughter was 2.5 years old, our oldest, and after our daughter was born, my wife had sort of struggled kind of getting back into the swing of things. Like, she just couldn't get herself out there to swim, bike, and run like she had, previously. And so I knew she was looking for something. I thought, I better check this thing out. I started looking around and saw that Oceanside CrossFit had a free trial. Come try out the class. And so I asked my wife, I said, hey, there's this thing I've been looking into. It's right around the corner from the house. You want to go try it? And she said, sure. Fortunately, all she said was sure. She didn't research it. She didn't look it up, because convinced had she looked at the website or looked at things, she would have said, no way, I'm not doing that shit. Right? So
Yeah.
I drag her over to Oceanside CrossFit. We do their free trial workout. And on the way home, she says, I said, what do you think of that? She goes, yeah, I think I'd like to give it a shot. And, as they say, the rest is history. That was like November of 2007.
Do you happen to remember what that trial workout was?
I don't. All I remember, I know there were some wall balls. There were some sumo deadlift high pulls with a kettlebell. And there was some running. And then they also had GHD sit-ups, but they said they wouldn't let us do it. And that kind of pissed me off. I was like, because I thought I was pretty fit, I was a triathlete. So I was like, well, that's lame. I want to do what everyone's doing. But at any rate, I do remember those three things specifically.
So that's pretty amazing that they had the presence of mind, even in those early days, to be like, yeah, you can't do this GHD sit-up. It's something that I try to figure out how to communicate to people nowadays as coaches, right? Like, how do we make sure we continue to take care of people who are trying this out? And how do we say no? And how do we set up that environment? Because you're a physical therapist, right? Like, when you look at this from the outset, like, is there potential for injury? For sure. Like anything else. But what do you think is something that people can do what do you think the mindset should be as a coach with a new person who walks in the door? How should they approach treating that person as what they are? Like, what, after your years and years of doing this now, and your background in physical therapy, and now being an extensively well-versed CrossFit coach, like, what would you give to encapsulate, here's the mindset you should have for a new person?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think one of the challenges with a new person, someone coming in, is that I think a lot of people come in with this preconceived notion that, oh, CrossFit, it's really freaking hard. It's going to leave you wrecked, right? And I think as the challenge as the coach in that scenario is, you kind of have to give them a little bit of that, right? But you just have to be careful of how much of that you give them, because, and I've actually seen coaches now default and make the mistake going the other direction of like, I'm going to really protect this person because they're new and they're deconditioned, and they give them too easy of a workout. And the person walks out breathing a little heavy, but it's kind of like, yeah, that wasn't that much harder than the 10K I ran or the boot camp class I did down the street. Right. And so I think the real challenge is finding that middle ground. And I think it's finding movements that you can dose someone with where the risk is fairly low,
Right.
And so
what would those movements be to you? So
I think one of the best ones, it doesn't matter who you are, the intensity's there, is pushing a sled.
Right? That's interesting. I was not expecting you to throw that one out there. That makes total sense.
Eccentric phase of sled pushing.
All concentric.
So you're not going to get super sore, but it doesn't matter who you are. We can jack your heart rate up. Like, I mean, I've made more people like run to the bathroom from sled pushing than lots of other things, right? But so I think properly dosed, you could get some sled pushing in there. I think
that's the only thing you risk on sled pushing is vomiting, right? Like, that's the main thing that happens is people are like, you know what? I'm going to go vomit now. So like you just have to, it's that weird stimulus. But I've never heard that like as a go-to for the first session. That's a good one.
Sled pushing, I think the row, and something that's a little bit more common would be like obviously, any of the machines, the rower, a bike, or a ski erg. Those are pretty safe. Again, there's no eccentric load there. So I think you can get something like that. And then I think you also have to give them something that is unusual. Right. So, you guys know we did this, the baseline workout. That was like ubiquitous.
Yeah. What was it?
So many gyms. It was a 500-meter row, 40 air squats, 30 sit-ups, 20 push-ups, and 10 pull-ups.
Yeah.
And it was fairly simple and easy to get someone brand new to do. The only thing I never liked about it was there wasn't anything so unique in there. Like if you could throw in, I don't know, a kettlebell swing or something like that. The one where we got buy-in, the movement that we got buy-in the most from that was the pull-up, because so many people would come in who are like, I I can't do a pull-up. And when we could show them how we could help them attain some form of a pull-up, whether it's a ring row or a banded strict pull-up or something like that, like the look in someone's eye when they do their first pull-up, even though they have like the world's thickest band under their feet, it's still, there's that look of like, holy crap, like I had no idea I was going to come in today and do a pull-up. So I think
the only thing you risk on the pull-up is that eccentric, right?
You do. Which is the nice thing in that workout, there's only 10 reps, right? So
right. I've always had like for my on-ramp one, my classic, I would revert to in the first session dosing them with a burpee, a squat and a run, whether it be overhead squat or air squat. So I teach them the squat series, then I do burpee, squat, run. So that way, like somebody who's like used to doing burpees, who usually hasn't done them with a run or hasn't done them with some complexity in a squat. So then it was like we would do like an AMRAP version of it. So rather than do it for time. So that way, someone who's a little bit more fit who comes in, you can like tweak up or down how many rounds they're getting. And you can kind of dose in the same way. But I love everything you're just saying about the like, throw a machine in there because it takes away any sort of eccentric. Same thing with a sled. Like that's a good call.
The AMRAP is definitely your friend with new folks as well. We taught this. We teach this in the CrossFit Kids course. Like when you're working with kids to do AMRAPs, because you exactly like you said, you control the amount of time that they're working. The only thing they're doing is how much work that they do. And what I will do, some of this is by design, and some of this is just a little bit by the way our gym is set up. Is when I'm working with newer folks, I'll actually do AMRAPs to keep the time on my watch, so they can't watch the clock and know what's happening.
Oh, I love that.
And I can end it early if it needs to be. Like if this person is like circling the drain, I can be like, and time. They've only done 3 minutes of the 7-minute AMRAP, right? But at that point, they're so fogged they don't know. So that's another little trick. The AMRAP's great, and I just don't let them know what the time is, and I keep time on my own.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the preconceived notions that you had being broken by that first what is fitness article, and then I'm sure more things continued to confront your previously held ideals. Can you think back and reflect on anything that kind of did that? And
for sure,
these days, okay, talk to me.
Well, so like I said, I was an endurance athlete, right? And I followed pretty closely the endurance, paradigm of long, slow distance. I wasn't a super high mileage guy. I was never one of those, but I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be that guy that did like 100-mile running week or whatever, but I just never got there. But I definitely followed the general paradigm of long, slow distance, high carb fueling and specificity. Like if you want to get better in those sports, you got to swim, bike, run. And even then, like everyone knew, if you spent some time in the gym throwing some weights around, it would probably benefit you as a triathlete. But the conundrum was when, because I'm already spending 15 to 20 hours a week swimming, biking, running. When the hell am I going to lift weights, right? So that's kind of what I came into this, into the CrossFit world with. And it was one of those things where it was like almost immediate, like a month into my training of starting CrossFit, I was already signed up for a marathon. And I had a fairly aggressive goal. I wanted to qualify for Boston. A friend of mine had qualified for Boston, and he's one of these guys that had been trying and was missing it. And so I told him one time, I was like, hey, if you qualify for Boston, I'll run a marathon and qualify for Boston. We could go in Boston together. And so he calls me, hey, I did it. I qualified for Boston. I was like, shit, all right. So I signed up for a race, and I started in CrossFit a month out in that race, which, again, going back to the old paradigm, like that's a mistake. You don't start a new style of training a month before a big event. But at any rate, my wife started, I was going to start. And, long story short, got to that race and had the best race of my life. Like I PR'd my marathon by 3.5 minutes. And the bigger aha moment came the next day when I was walking down the stairs at home, and I was like, oh, like, okay, I'm a little sore, but I'm not devastated. Like normally if I was, doing classic marathon training, I'd go out, run the marathon, feel however I feel. And then for the next week, just be devastated. And like, I can't run, I can't do anything. But I was like, I feel okay. So that was kind of a big aha moment. Like I can do a little less volume. I can do a different style of training, have a great result, and still feel like a human the next day. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then I started digging around, and I found Brian McKenzie's stuff, CrossFit Endurance. And again, it's totally challenged my ideas on training, because he was, low volume, high intensity, even with your run training. I was like, doesn't make a lot of sense, but I like the idea. I like the idea that I'm not going to spend as much time training. So I started playing around with that. And I was like, oh, well, this seems to be working as well. So then I go to my level 1. And again, at the time, I'm still following the classic endurance athlete nutrition protocol, which is just slam as many carbs as you can, keep protein low-ish and fat even lower. And so I go to my level 1, and Rob Wolf is teaching, not Rob Lowe. Rob Wolf is teaching the nutrition portion. And at that point, I was like, okay, so these guys are right about the fitness thing. They seem to be right about the endurance training thing. Perhaps, maybe they're right about the well, right? And so from that day forward, I was like, all right, I'm gonna give this a shot. And so I jumped in. Back then everything was zone, so I jumped in with the zone and immediately saw results. I was like, I'm a different human being. Like, people would come in to work that I hadn't seen for a while, and they're like, what the hell have you been doing? Right. And so that was
That's so, I mean, your story of like being not a part of this community, in fact, being almost against part of this community, and then hearing something that you're like, fine, I'll give it a shot. Like, that one to me is a very common thing amongst the people who I've met who were early adopters of what this was, is it was like, I don't agree with you, but I'm willing to take a look. And that I think that mentality persists within our own community of people who are like, I don't necessarily agree, or I don't know, that doesn't sound right to me, but I'm going to take a closer look. Like, that mentality is actually relatively unique, because I think a lot of people see something that's like different and they're like, nah, it's different, so I'm not going to pay attention. But there's a lot of those within our community who are like willing to take on new things. What do you think that is? Why do you think that it either CrossFit has drawn that, like, or do you think it's like it's been like people who found CrossFit, the reason they found CrossFit was because of that, or was it more like this nature of training that we have causes us to be a little bit more open to being like, I don't know, maybe let me give it a shot?
Well, yeah, I guess, certainly there has to be some sort of selection bias, right? We see people in our community that are willing to challenge even their own norms, because that's sort of what CrossFit has always been about, like challenging the norms. And so the people who stick around are only those people who are willing to accept that ideal, right? And so the people who are unwilling to accept that wash out pretty quickly. And I've seen that in our gym many times, where it's almost always guys come in with a bit of ego, and they get shown up pretty quickly. Like, you can tell it initially, they're a little like, why do we have to do this? Like, teach them an overhead squat or whatever. And they're like, it doesn't make sense. And as soon as they get challenged, they're out the door. So I think there's some, selection bias for sure. Like, we've surrounded ourselves with folks who are willing to do that. Now, why myself and you and others are willing to do that when others aren't, I don't really know. I can't really put my finger on that. But and I've definitely seen some folks come in who were resistant. I think about in our affiliate, I've seen folks who've come in who are resistant, and I assumed would wash out pretty quickly. And I don't know if it's just that they see other folks who have had great results, or maybe they know someone, a family member, coworker, or friend who's like, just stick with it. And then next, you just start to see, you start to chip away at that shield that they have around themselves. And
totally, it's just what they experience. Like, I think like that's back in the original days, it makes sense that a lot of the early adopters were like that, because it was counterculture, and people who were willing to be counterculture went and did it. Nowadays, it's so much more mainstream. You get more people who are like, I don't think that's cool, but I'm going to try it anyway, just because so many people are doing it, willing to give it a shot. But I think that even puts a larger weight on all our shoulders as coaches. We have a bigger responsibility to convince, for lack of a better word, people why this is amazing, which means to me that we need to be far more educated and understanding and able to validate someone's perspective, but then be like, that's correct, but it's also very wrong. Like, like I totally hear what you're saying, but let me show you why you're wrong, and do it in such a way that they're like, holy shit, I am wrong. That's great. Let me come in and do your gym. Because I think for me, those type of people are my favorite now, because if you can get one of those people who's stubborn and bought into something else, bought into this, they become the biggest advocates for it, because they're like, I was anti and now I'm pro, like,
for sure. Yeah. And how you approach them is critical, right? And I know in the early days, even like when we started at Oceanside, it was sort of like, yeah, this is how we do it. If you don't like it, piss off. There's another gym down the street that you can go to. And, and I would say, even like, if you look at what's happened at the level 1 courses, and like with CrossFit training and how refined that has been, back 2008, 2009, it was sort of the Wild West. And, you could pretty much say anything you wanted to anyone. And now it's a way more refined message. And we understand that, like, the early adopters, they're in already. And so we can't talk to the new folks who are coming in, sort of like, what is this thing? I'm interested, but I'm a little scared of it. We can't talk to them the same way we talk to the folks who are just like, I don't give a shit what it is. Give it to me, Those days are long gone. And so that's how we approach folks in the gym now. Like, it has to be a slightly softer approach, kind of a more welcoming, like, hey, let me hear where you're coming from and explain how we can help you get to where you need to be, as opposed to the way it was, 15 years ago.
Well, but what I love what you said, it's a softer approach with how you talk about it, but it's not a softer approach with what the program is. And I think that that's where I see some gyms kind of missing the mark, is they'll be like, we're going to make this entry-level program that's like super wanker on the side, just to appeal to a mass audience. And it like completely goes against the ideals of what we believe in. And then they get people in the door and they're like, we assume that we can take them from this and transfer them this. It's like a 30-minute sweat class. And it's like, well, you're kind of undermining your own value structure by not providing context for where that sits in the larger grand scheme of things. You can build a community around the same general program in the language that the coaches use being softer, and then the program being hard AF, relative to someone's level. So I think that's one thing that I see occasionally happen nowadays, where people try to make CrossFit light, and you're like, I don't know if you're doing the right thing, so that's a conversation to be had.
Well, and I almost think that it's unfair. It's a disservice to the new person, because then when they do, move up to actual CrossFit, then it feels like a bait and switch, right? You're like, oh, you lured me in with this like easy thing, and then you just clubbed me over the head with this hard thing, right? Like, but you still have to find, there's still a balance there. Like, you can't bring someone in and just club them over the head, right? So it's the challenge. 100%. And I don't think there's not a simple answer of like, do this exercise or do this workout, and that'll be a great entry point for every single one of your new athletes. It really is reading the room, hearing, what their background is and where they come from, and then watching them move for a few minutes and being willing to like dial things up or dial things down on the fly.
Yeah. Let's pivot just real quick and talk about CrossFit Health.
Sure.
And state of that and what's going on with it, your involvement, what's going on there, and talk to me. CrossFit Health.
I don't think I'm not the person to speak on the state of CrossFit Health. I would refer you to someone like a Mike G, or even my wife Amy, to speak to that. My involvement, I'm exceptionally excited about the idea of CrossFit Health, and the primary premise here is to bridge the gap between CrossFit or fitness and health, and my involvement in that has been to teach at the HCPL ones, the healthcare provider level ones that we started toward the end of last year. And so what CrossFit is providing now is a level 1 course that is specific to healthcare providers. And it's pretty broad in its scope as far as who they're considering as healthcare providers. Like, it's of course we have a lot of physicians and physical therapists and nurses, but we also have firefighters, we have athletic trainers, we've had like Army medics come in, massage therapists. So it's anyone in a healthcare related field can come in and attend a level 1 where you're with your peer group. And it's been really cool. Like the material's the same, the content hasn't changed, but some of the level of questioning that we get and the level of like the reason people are there is to learn the level 1 content, but also to connect with other healthcare providers and find out how are they talking to their patients, how are they talking to their members, and how are they bridging this gap. And it's been a really cool thing to see at these seminars.
Yeah. I mean, is that mainly what you're teaching right now? Is those seminars?
No, not mainly. I've taught a handful of those, and they're expanding. Like they've just done the first 2 international ones. They did one in Brazil and one in Europe somewhere. I can't remember exactly where in Europe, but the plan is to try to do some more international gigs and to bring some more into the US here. So.
Awesome. I think the more people we can get like that, the better within our community. Hence the reason that we're doing them.
It's amazing. Like the Saturday social. I don't know about what you've experienced, Pat, but in my experience, post-COVID, the Saturday social is not a thing. Like people get out of there pretty much as quick as they can. And at these healthcare provider level 1s, like, we finished the seminar at 5 and at 6:30, they're still hanging out, chit-chatting. And we're kind of like, kind of need to get out of here, but I mean, they just want to connect with each other and they want to talk. And the cool thing about these healthcare provider level 1s is that we're getting people like coming up to Tacoma, Washington, from like Miami. Like people are willing to travel long distances again to attend these seminars and connect with other people. And it's been awesome.
Do you find that the attendees of this are already bought into CrossFit, or are these people that maybe are on the fence, and or maybe a friend is bought in and they're like, hey, I want to bring my other doctor friends along with me?
I would say, Cody, as of right now, 90 to 95% of them are tried and true CrossFitters. They're people that have been doing it for a while, and either they see this as like, hey, this is a cool opportunity for me to go to a level 1 and get my CEUs, continuing medical education credits at the same time, right? So it works well that way. But we have had some folks who are like, yeah, this is my first experience, my first exposure. I have friends that do it. I have big folks that talk about it. So I wanted to check it out. So yeah, right now it's mostly folks who are already within the community. And the goal is that with them learning more and being able to, I'll say this, I know lots of folks that are in the community, but still don't understand CrossFit, right? You talk to a healthcare provider and you start talking to them about CrossFit, and you can tell that like, you can look at them, you can watch them do pull-ups and thrusters and know that they're CrossFitters. But when you hear them talk about the program and the philosophy and who's appropriate for it, you're like, yeah, you're not quite there yet, right? And so this course, I think, is helping take some of those folks and give them a much deeper level understanding of the program and how actually scientific it is and how science-based it is and how smart and well thought out it is. And then they can start to disseminate that to some of the other folks in their community who are probably doubters, probably haters, probably talking people off of trying this program. And so that's been really cool, is to see people start to realize like, oh shit, this goes way deeper than I thought it was.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my, I joked around at the beginning saying you came into this with more knowledge than I'll ever have. And that wasn't actually a joke. That's true. You know a lot more about human anatomy, and you know a lot about just the depth of your knowledge is extreme. I came into this with nothing. I came into CrossFit as a voice and musical theater major, like I sung and danced, like the learning the sports and exercise science of it was something that I picked up along the way. And what's been interesting in my own evolution, because I've been in it for 20 years, is that the harder I lean on this information, the deeper it goes. Because most communities that I've been a part of, and most, doctrines that I look to follow, because like I'm questioning by nature. I think that's part of what makes life fun, is to lean on stuff and to be like, well, why? And like go a little deeper and push. A lot of things are only like one layer deep, maybe 2 layers deep, and then it just falls apart and there's nothing there. And it's been fascinating for me to like lean on CrossFit, and the harder I lean in and the deeper I go. And even when I pick apart little things that are like nuancy, it's like, no, they're like that for a reason. And they've been like that for a reason since 2000, and you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
And I think the more we can get higher level educated people, like doctors and whatnot, in seeing some of this depth, like the better off we are. I've taught one MDL1, and
Right.
I loved it, because I was expecting these guys to have some like chip on their shoulder, and they came in and they were all kind of staunch, and like they were doctors, and there was like 40 of them. But man, like I forgot that they're lifelong students. Like they're people who spent 30 years in school. So like they know how to take a class. So they sit down, they're super attentive, they're right there. And they ask questions that are like, if it's not covered in the material, they'll ask a poignant question, and then you give them an answer and they're like, oh, okay. And then you move on. Like it was one of my favorite gigs to teach because of that. It wasn't like someone trying to ego me into giving them their answer. It was literally like them just very attentive and be like, okay, I get it. That makes sense. And that's I think the higher level of education you come in with, when you listen to the level 1, not like tangential stuff, but when you come to a level 1, I've yet to have somebody be like, nah, like it's never happened.
And I think the other part of that too is like they come in with a high level of education, but I also think the only way you can be a good healthcare provider is you got to know what you know, but you also have to know what you don't know.
Right.
And the reality is a physician doesn't come in with a lot of exercise science knowledge. They don't come in with a lot of nutrition knowledge, right? They have the basic physiology, and then if you're a specialist, like if you're a cardiologist, right, you've forgotten most of the musculoskeletal stuff that you knew that you had to learn in medical school, because it doesn't apply as a cardiologist per se, right? And so I think, again, to be a good clinician, you have to be open and say, hey, this is not my area of expertise. I have a question about it. And if you can answer that question, sweet, thank you, let's move on, right? And it's funny because when we first started doing these new healthcare provider level 1s, we had this little like Zoom meeting, and we were talking about like, hey, be prepared for really challenging questions and a lot of pushback. And there's been zero pushback, zero, like, oh, they're trying to stump us. It's been a great experience.
Agreed. Well, I'll sidestep again. In the title of this episode, it says CrossFit, which I think we talked about. And then it says, it was the 3 C's here. It said CrossFit, Carnivore, and Choices. Cody, what is Choices?
Well, like I was scrolling through Dan's Instagram, right? Like I was just, getting a little glimpse into.
I love the picture you chose, by the way.
Who he is. Oh yeah. Like, I wanted to see like, what he's about, what he does. A lot of endurance stuff in there. I've seen some meat, right? Like a big tomahawk steak or something. I've seen an ice bath photo, but I also seen some quotes in there about, choosing what you choose today impacts, your life tomorrow, and the choices that you make, we can relate that into health as well, right? Like, and what that looks like for everybody. Another thing that I seen was a picture of a class of yours, and it was actually the background of the photo I used today for the thumbnail. And I think you said like the average age in this class is like 70 years old, right? And again, that's a choice. That's a choice by those individuals to continue to keep showing up for their health every day. And that's kind of the overarching theme of this whole thing is CrossFit, health, and all the things that we've talked about already here today, and continue to choose that day after day.
Okay. So I'll change that into a question, and I'll say, Dan, how can we provide as coaches, what can we do to make people's choices easier to come to the gym? Or what can we do to make it so they choose things that are more difficult? Maybe what type of a thing can we put out in our own spaces that make those kinds of choices more acceptable and more often for people?
That's a good question. So I think one is being willing to talk about the fact that it is a choice, right? And that most people won't choose that, right? And so I think it's embracing that idea that you're choosing to do something that most people won't do. So this past weekend, I was in Kansas, the middle of nowhere, Kansas, Emporia, Kansas, supporting a friend of mine who's doing a 100-mile gravel bike race. And it's hot, it's muddy, it's humid, and there's sort of like this, we were having this conversation about like, why do we do this stuff? Like, why do we choose to do these ridiculously hard things that in the moment you're thinking, this is so awful. Why do I pay good money to sign up for a race, to travel, spend all that time training? And there is definitely a part of, at least for me, and my friend admitted this as well, there is something about being the type of person that says, I choose to do these things. I choose to do these things that 90+% of the population won't do. And I choose to do these things because I know that they're the right thing to do. And so I think it's one is being open and willing to talk to people about everything. We have choices in everything we do, right? I was teaching a course to some Army folks, and I was talking about nutrition. And I was like, I understand that you don't always get to choose when, where, what, and how much you eat, but everything you put in your mouth is a choice. Like, no one's forcing you to put that food in your mouth. Everything you put in there is a choice. So everything that we do is a choice. And so what we do is we highlight things that people do that they don't have to do, right? So if they're doing some sort of crazy event outside the gym, that was a choice. If they're doing something in the gym that was harder than they've ever done before, or they're PRing, like, it was a choice for them to push that hard. And I think we just have to remind people of that. So that's part of it. And
I like it.
I think that's a big part of it.
I think basically what you're saying is making people aware of the choices that they're making, bringing presence to what's going on. And for you in the gym, you highlight that, and you highlight those like, hey, that's awesome that you chose that, or that's cool. I love that. I mean, it's bringing, I think awareness is a huge thing for for much of growth is that, like, I mean, things you're not aware of, you can't change, and things you're not aware of, like, you can't grow from, and like creating a space that you're constantly made aware of the difficult things that you're choosing to do, and that it's a choice. It's huge. That's awesome. So I think we can carry that forward as coaches.
I think on another level too, is I think it's, people will see that like, yes, I get it. You choose to exercise or you choose to not exercise. But there are other things where we maybe less consciously make choices. And I use my dad as an example of this. And I think a lot of people can think back to family members or friends that they have that aren't in the best health. And they'll often think back to like, well, it's my lot in life. It's like, my dad had heart disease, his dad had heart disease, whatever. It's just who we are. And I think people don't recognize that the choices that you make along the way have a bigger impact on your lot in life than the things you couldn't choose, like your parents, right? And so, one of the things I always remind people is like, I don't know where I came up with this analogy, but it's like, I feel like sometimes there are folks who just think that they're the passenger on the bus. Like, I'm just sitting on the bus and I'm going to go wherever the bus takes me. And you actually have the choice to walk up and tap the bus driver on the shoulder and be like, hey, get the hell out of the way. Let me drive this thing. I'm going to drive this bus to where I want to go. Right. And the choices you make along the way, whether that's, nutritionally, whether that's from a fitness perspective, whether that's, dealing with mental health things, like, there are choices that you can make along the way that will help get you closer to your destination versus just sitting there and just seeing where the hell you end up.
Yeah. I think one thing I would just add to that is that some choices are more difficult than others. And even the same choice and even the same choice for different people is a more difficult decision, or a difficult choice, I would say. That we have to just realize that Yeah, we all have choices, but sometimes those are more difficult, just straight up for a certain person who has to make
absolutely,
them.
Absolutely. Sort of, this kind of reminds me, like, that one of my pet peeves is I don't see this as much anymore, but you used to see the whole, like, what's your excuse memes, like you'd be some fitness influencer who just had a baby and is like, I'm 3 weeks out and look at my 6-pack abs. What's your excuse? And I always feel like, potentially lots of excuses, right? So I'm certainly not saying that, like, I'm certainly not trying to, like, do the blame game and say,
no. You didn't sound like you were.
Just recognize that, like, you can take, even if it's the smallest step, like, make the choice to take the smallest step possible that takes you one step closer to your desired end state, instead of just sitting there going, there's this end state that I want to get to, but I can't get there. I don't know how to get there. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say that, because a lot of people don't know how to get there, but, like, take a step, choose to take a step. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. I find myself having to come to, like, literally facing choices where, like, I'll do something and I'll be like, right now, I could not, and shit, like, and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. And it's like, okay, whatever, next time.
When I make the wrong choice frequently, right? I'm never going to stop making the wrong choice. But and that's another part of it, is recognizing that you made a decision, right? You chose poorly. Now, what can you learn from that, and how can you choose better next time?
Yeah.
The thing that I've heard is, in every situation, it's where you have to make a choice. You're either going to take a step forward or you're going to take a step back, because even if you take no step, that's an opportunity cost where you could have taken a step forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left in this thing, and I do have a couple of, like, just, let's say, random questions that I threw in here that I want to ask you, Dan. Being classically trained as a PT and knowing that typically the education system, like you already hit on it, like, a lot of doctors come in with little to no knowledge in one aspect of study. And if the more specialized they get, they forget some things. But being classically trained as a PT, do you find that there's anything that's missing inside of that field of study? And something that's, like, lagging behind?
You're trying to get me into trouble. You're trying to get me into trouble here with my physical therapy colleagues, aren't you? Yeah, I mean, of course there's stuff missing, because it's only, 3 years of education that covers a really broad spectrum of things, from, like, like, things I didn't even know that physical therapists did when I went to physical therapy school. Like, I didn't know wound care was a thing that physical therapists did. And so I went into it with a sports medicine background. That's all I thought we did. So there's a really broad spectrum of things that you have to cover in physical therapy school. So you can't cover it all. But I think one of the most eye-opening things for me was that, physical therapists will often say that, we're the movement specialists. But when you ask them about, especially coming right out of physical therapy school, if they don't have some sort of exercise science, not even exercise science, if they don't have some sort of fitness, strength and conditioning, CrossFit background, they know a lot about physical therapy movements, but not necessarily about movements in the wild, let's say, right? Functional exercises, things like that. And so the biggest, my biggest recommendation would be for physical therapists would be open to learning about actual fitness. Because that was I thought I knew, right? I thought I knew until I read this "What is Fitness" thing. I thought I knew something about fitness until I got slapped in the face with this idea of, like, you don't really know that much about actual movement. And so I think that's a space where we need to expand a bit. I also think that learning to turn up the intensity a little bit, even in just rehab, is an important factor. I think we play it safe a little bit too much in rehab, and I think we could do a little bit more for folks if we turned up the intensity a bit.
Philip Kelly said his PT hates working out and never told him.
Oh,
and never did. That's a bummer, man.
Well, I mean, I've seen it. I know lots of physical therapists who haven't worked out since the last time they were forced to work out, probably in high school PE class.
Jeez. Can I flip that question on its head and just say, what do you think from your PT background we're lacking in our space that you'd like to see more of? What is it? What is something that's been done over there that you'd like to see a little bit more of over here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
As the person who doesn't have the background, I'd sure love to know.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I came into it with was the ability to sort of, I sort of was just critical, like, we're not the movement specialists, but one of the things that I definitely learned in physical therapy school and in my athletic training background was to watch people move and sort of break down that movement. And I think a lot of times, and you might be able to relate to this, Pat, like at the level 2, when we're watching someone coach and teach movement, you can tell, like, you can just watch their eyeballs and they're just like, they're looking all over the place. Like, they don't have a directed focus and vision on the movement that they're actually watching. And so that was, certainly something we were taught in physical therapy school is like, hey, we need to watch the action at the hip. We need to watch the action at the knee, and understanding what the hip and knee do. Right. Again, I don't think you have to have, graduate level training in biomechanics or anything like that, but just being able to like focus your vision and at level 2 is what I often talk to people about is like this forest and trees concept, right? And so, if I'm watching someone move, the first thing I want to do is step back and get like the full field vision. Like, let me look at the entire forest and see what trees need to be focused on. And then I'm going to laser beam in on the tree, right? Like, okay, I look at the whole person, something was funky with the hip. So now I'm going to watch the hip. And then I step back again. I look at the whole thing. I'm like, nope, it wasn't the hip. It was the knee. Nope, it wasn't the knee. It was the ankle, right? And so but being able to have that very, very focused vision. And that's definitely something that we learned a lot in physical therapy school.
I think to encapsulate a little bit of what you're saying, I agree. It's this ability almost to, like, you don't have to know the why, but knowing the why helps you put things in context. Absolutely. So continuing to educate yourself, but even on a basic level, oftentimes what I see, and is what you're saying, is people will coach a cue versus coaching a point of performance. So they look at the big picture and they hear a cue in their head that they've been told, and they're like, that person's not doing that cue, must coach that cue. And oftentimes that's not wrong, but sometimes it can be. And the manifestation of that is like a person who's falling over backwards on their heel because all they hear is heel, 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 heel. And they're coaching just that with a lack of full foot on the ground. So it's almost this, like, if we could bring a little bit, a refocusing back to like, what are we trying to have happen? And let me be very specific with where I look to hit those points of performance. And that's just any given movement that you're doing. You look at what those points are and then go, look close for that one. And then coach to seeing if I can get that one thing to happen. Exactly. Look for that tree, Oh, tree's not there. Step back to the bigger picture, look back to another tree. Like, I agree with you. I think I would bring that on a basic level to more coaches earlier.
Right. Yep.
And I try to at level 1s, but it's kind of like over people's heads.
Yeah, the level 1's sort of a tough environment for that. There's, it's such a sip from a fire hose kind of moment, right?
Yeah. Well, we try. Cody, you got anything else for us? Or I think we hit our has the internet exploded? What's going on? Oh, you're muted, but I do appreciate your lips moving.
Sorry. I've got a mute on my mic.
That's cute.
I got one last question, and we'll just keep it really short here. But, from an endurance standpoint, I just threw this out there. I thought of it theoretically earlier, right? Let's say a gym offers 10 classes a day. What do you think about cutting it down to 5, making every class 2 hours long, and we say, all right, we're training for 60 plus minutes now to capture that extremely long end of the duration, just like we would if we were going to do, something, extremely short. Is there benefit to going long, or is that 40-minute, basically about as long as you can fit into a 1-hour class, enough to capture the benefit there?
Okay, so is there a benefit to going long? Sure, we sort of have to define long, right? Like I said, I was at that bike race this weekend in Kansas. My friend was doing the 100-mile race. That was not the long. Like the marquee race was 200 miles, and there were actually people there that were doing 350 miles, right? So we sort of have to define long. If you look at CrossFit programming, they're certainly going to program the 15K run, which is 9 miles, right? There's Clovis, which has 10 miles of running and 150 burpee pull-ups. That's an hour and a half if you're fairly fast, that workout. So is there benefit to doing workouts that are going to take you 1.5 hours to 2 hours long? Absolutely. Does it make sense to structure your gym schedule so that you can do that 5 times a week? Absolutely not. But it certainly needs to happen on occasion. And I think this is what we learned from at least what I learned from my CrossFit endurance experience, was that you can get a ton of endurance benefit from a 30, 40, 50-minute workout, and not as frequently have to do the really long stuff.
I think of it like, most affiliates once a year, they're going to do Murph.
Right.
And that's a 60+ minute workout for the average individual.
Yeah.
Right. Are we missing out by not doing it more times throughout the year? Right.
Potentially. I think from a fitness perspective, certainly, like, doing it once a year probably isn't enough. I also think that from an affiliate perspective, you're missing out on a community opportunity if, once a quarter, once every, twice a year, you do something other than Murph, right? Pick something else to do that's long. The funny thing is, like, and we talk about when we talk about programming, the mistake people make is trying to lean toward what people want. And what people want are those really long, grindy workouts that, from a programmer's perspective, don't make a lot of sense, right? Like, I have done this, especially in my earlier days, like, programmed a workout that I thought was going to be a nice, sweet workout, and it takes them 45 minutes to do. And I'm thinking, well, that was a huge mistake. And what does everyone say when they're finished? That was awesome. I love that, because they love the big, grindy sweat fests. And so I think you're missing out on a community opportunity if you don't do that a couple of times a year, but it's also a fitness opportunity for not doing it every once in a while as well.
All right. Well,
it's not a well that you have to go to all the time, especially for the average fitness enthusiast, right? If you're trying to become, if you want to do well in endurance sports, you've got to go long more often than those who aren't. But if you're just the average, I just want to be fitter for as long as I possibly can be, then it's not a well you have to go to all the time.
I'd be curious too, like, if anybody's watching this after the live is over and is posted, if you have something that you do at your gym regularly that's not Murph, that's something that's different, that's, a community builder, it's one of those longer workouts like that, like, drop it in the comments. I'm just curious to see what people do out there. I've been to a few affiliates that have, like, their own benchmarks that are like, hey, we're going to do one class on a Saturday. It's going to be 9 a.m. and it's undefined, end time. It's whenever we're finished. And I live in Huntsville, Alabama, and we've got a mountain, right, called Montesano. And one of the workouts was, we're going to meet up here and we're just dragging things up and down this mountain for the entirety of whatever the trail was. And of course, like, we don't have 50 people that show up, but maybe we have 20 or 25 people. And it's a really cool, thing to get out of the gym, do something that's different, but is also in that longer time frame.
Absolutely. And there's value in that for sure.
Pat, I've got nothing else.
Same.
Dan.
I don't know. I feel pretty good.
I appreciate it. I appreciate both of you guys being on. And one last time for our sponsors. And if you didn't know, we are big fans of ourselves, right? We often say that, our favorite sponsor is best hour of their day.
Ackerman's pretty humble, though.
You mean your main sponsor? Because your favorite sponsor, O2.
Oh, our favorite sponsor is definitely O2. And again, if you want to check that out, you can go to the link. I will pin that in the comments. It is buy 3 24 packs. You get 2 free. You get a free fridge. You get a Yeti Rambler. A lot of cool stuff that's going on there. And there's some other stuff that's on that webpage too. Again, I'll put it in the comments here. But right now, Best Hour has got something going on too for Affiliate University, which is, our business coaching platform where we want to get affiliates in there and help them solve all the world's problems. Right now, what we've got going on is a super killer offer. You enroll in Affiliate University, and Best Hour sponsors admission to a coaching credential of your choice, a coaching certificate course, right? Could be the level 1, level 2, level 3. Maybe you're going for your level 4, and some of the other stuff in there as well. We will give that to the affiliate owner, and it's up to the affiliate owner what they want to do with it, right? You can use it yourself. You can pass it along to somebody that's deserving on your team to help level up your staff too. So I'm just going to share my screen really fast here. You go to affiliateuniversity.com or besthouroftheday.com/affiliate university. You scroll down to the bottom right here. You can book a time to talk to a coach and, just see if it's going to be a good fit for you and your affiliate. Those are booking up super fast. I posted about this like 3 days ago, and I think like 3 weeks worth of time slots were gone immediately, like within 12 hours. So if you're watching this, affiliate owner, if you're a coach, pass it along to your affiliate owner, but definitely go check that stuff out. That is a killer offer that is limited. We're not going to do that forever. We're just doing it right now. So check it out. Pat, you got anything?
Nope. Just thank Dan for coming on and being so amazing and smart.
Dude,
I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, heck yeah. Next time I'll try to find a better photo. All right, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow for the progression. We're going to have Sam O'Connor on. He is getting ready for his level 4, which I think is coming up in like 2 weeks. This is like a last minute. Give me all the feedback you got before he goes to sit for his level 4, or I guess.
Am I doing that one?
I was going to say, there's no sitting.
There's no sitting.
I am doing that one, aren't I?
You are, yeah. So Pat's going to be on there for Sam O'Connor. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. That is 3:30 Eastern. Dan, Pat.
Good luck, Sam.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you.